We have to check and see, is my practice too effortful? Is there too much judgment? If there is, then the body will start to tense up, and we'll start to recognize that there are patterns that we might call no pain, no gain, or like this is part of the spiritual path, so I have to struggle. You are, in my eyes, exactly as you need to be. No questions asked. At the same time, included in that is a part of you that is aware of your own tendencies, which aren't as helpful for you to enjoy that reality. So the work isn't to change it's not to get in the way of the blossoming of the flower. It's not to try and argue with how big or how small the fruit is. It's how much am I getting in the way of nature playing its role through me of evolution.
Hello and welcome to Curious Ones podcast by Yandara. I'm Yael Ginsberg, the host of the podcast, a yoga and meditation teacher and philosophy lover. Each week you will hear eye-opening interviews with the different teachers of the Yandara Yoga Institute, located in beautiful Baja, Mexico, along with other teachers that pass through here. This life-changing knowledge shared through authentic, heartfelt communication will help you live a happier, more fulfilled, and connected life. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to Curious Ones podcast by Yandara. I'm Yael Ginsberg, and I just want to start by saying thank you to anybody who's been listening, supporting, writing comments, writing feedback and messages. It means so much to us. And as usual, I'll add that if you find any insight in this episode, anything that is new to you or interesting, please share this with your friends, your loved ones, so that more people can benefit from this information and also to support our podcast. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guest today. He's been on the podcast already a few times, Christopher Perkins. Christopher is the co-founder of Yandara and the lead teacher here, and just an amazing human. So welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me back. And yeah, I look forward to what comes next in our curious conversation.
Mm-hmm. So this conversation actually stems from our first conversation where you kind of briefly mentioned that we shouldn't be constantly trying to improve ourselves and better ourselves, because at some point we have to accept that we are just the way that we are. So that really touched me when you said that. So I thought it could be a great topic for another conversation. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. That conversation that we had is something that is a sacred and special conversation, because it touches on something I think that in the spiritual and self-help, more conscious communities, you might say, can be a very controversial topic, because, there's a teaching there, self-acceptance. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about self-acceptance and what that actually means and how to achieve it and what it looks like for each one of us, which is a very subtle dance.
Yeah.
Because obviously we have tools, we have techniques, we have a path for each one of us to step onto, whether it's a traditional, meditation or yogic path or a religion of some sort, or just a lifestyle choice, which you and I both know has tremendous benefit. There's no question. So I want to be very clear that this concept of self-acceptance has nothing to do with apathy. Mm-hmm. Has nothing to do with giving up.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with looking at ourselves as somehow stagnated and therefore we give up.
Yeah, like giving up, exactly.
That's not what this is about. That's why I think it's such a subtle and sensitive topic, because if one doesn't arrive at it in an appropriate way, in a healthy way, then it could easily be mistaken for some, okay, now I don't have to do anything and I'm my highest version. You know what I mean? So like, this is just who I am. I'm a jerk and I can just tell people how I feel without any regard, and that's just who I am, you know?
Yeah.
And of course, this is one of the dangers of introducing this concept early on in the path without unpacking it, without giving it a context. So we're talking about a very, what was a quite secret tantric teaching, or only in the final chapters of the Yogic Sutras, where we find these types of teachings that refer to complete and utter acceptance of one's unique version without any concept of trying to make it better, different, more spiritual, more accomplished, in any way, shape, or form. So, and there's a reason that doesn't come up early on in the teachings for this particular pitfall, you might say, of thinking that, oh, we've arrived. Yeah. We've understood the mode of being, which ultimately is aligned with the universal power of truth and unity. You see, like we could think, oh, here I am. I've had a couple of really powerful experiences, and someone told me there's nothing to do now. Just, be yourself and whatever. This is a paradox. Yeah. It's like a gardener doing absolutely everything he can to produce the best yield of fruit without ever touching the fruit itself. You can't pull on the flower. You can't pull back the petals on the blossom. You can't push on the branch to try and get it to grow taller.
So no adjustments.
Intervention. You see, what we're on this path endeavoring to do is explore our role in the evolutionary process.
Of
in the
universe.
Awakening. Exactly, of being a part of that natural flow of change towards flow. Yeah. And when we find ourselves struggling, when we find ourselves in a life situation of challenge or not sure what to do, things like that, we reach out for techniques, for lineages, for practices, for teachings, podcasts, whatever it is that can help us. Yeah. So there's a really important place for this. I need something different now. I'm done. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, for example, that kind of old. Yeah. So there's a natural progression to what we had discussed, which is, and now we just let the personality, the personality be what it is, which is a human. Yeah. Having its experience in a limited body, a limited mind, with, of course, the base understanding that I'm a spiritual entity. I'm also consciousness, unlimited.
Yeah. Because when I think about it, it's very confusing for me to really kind of negotiate where is the line, because I consider myself a person that wants to keep getting better. And honestly, for me, it's really about this kind of inner strength and control of the mind in a way, or like kind of this discipline of the mind in order to show up the way that I want to in every situation, which obviously doesn't always happen. Sure. So that's one side of it, of like always getting to be a better human than I was yesterday. But then the other side is, where does the line draw of, but who I am is already good enough? Because when I think about myself as like, I always need to get better, that means that something is wrong.
Usually, exactly. Yeah. That's what we're going to touch into. Yeah. Perfectly described. I think you're not alone. I think it's a gray scale, of course. Everyone will have their place where they land on that. How much of my desire for betterment is based in a feeling of lack or a feeling of, non-acceptance. Yeah. So if we, for example, think of ourselves as that blossoming fruit, every day is another fruit of life. Every day is another expression. Then as a gardener, I would go out. This is an ideal approach, you might say. I would go out and I'd check and see the soil. I'd check and see if there's moisture there. I'd check and see if the pH is balanced. I'd check and see, if there's enough sun, if it's too much competition with other trees. Check and see if there's enough protection from the elements, too much wind, things like that. So without ever judging the fruit. I don't have to understand how the fruit's produced. I don't have to understand actually what mechanisms come together for that perfect manifestation. But I do have a responsibility as a steward to that land, or to my life, you might say, in this analogy, the land equals my daily life, to check the conditions, to check and see, like whether or not I'm supporting the fruit. So if we can consider that our judgments on the way that the fruit is, or the flower is happening, it's just a habit. It comes from insecurities, or comes from learned cultural conditioning, things like that. We can at least start to have some discernment. What part of my effort is based on this idea that something's wrong? And what part of it is just simply doing what I, as a human, is wired to do, which is to evolve. That's my wiring. I don't want to get in the way of that. I want to trust that is part of my DNA, is to produce a stronger experience, stronger and more vital human experience.
That's such a good point. So evolution is actually just part of our nature.
It's in our favor always too. Yes, it's part of our nature, and it's always in our favor.
Our nature as humans, and obviously the earth and everything that's around us. So
we have a role that we've taken, and we identify it. In yogic terms, we call it ahamkar. Ahamkar is the one that tries to identify itself as the doer. I'm the one producing a better version of myself. If I don't do it, no one will. You could say, in more refined terms, I'm the one that's showing up to experience and respond to the process of natural evolution, of natural growth, of natural change.
Allowing it to happen.
Yes, exactly. And because I allow it, I become more effective at responding. If I allow, okay, Christopher looks like this today. The Christopher show is ... Okay? That's the foundation. Showing up for what it is, how it is. We assess as best we can without judgment. We all will be born with some life experience that, will give us a reason to judge, whether it's a lot or a little, doesn't matter, whatever degree, I'm sure that will arise. Oh, I don't like my hair today. Or, oh, I wish I was a stronger physical.
Everybody has something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I should be more successful in my Those thought forms will be weeded out by the light of awareness when we can discern what is actually helpful, what is not helpful, and what is serving and what is not serving.
But does determining if something is helpful or not, is that enough to change the way that we think?
Well, it's almost like saying, the shining a light on the darkness, is that enough to get rid of the darkness?
It's the only way.
It's the only thing, and you don't have to apply actually anything other than that awareness. The thought will show itself for what it is, which is, it's just a judgment. It's not actually an effective approach.
And maybe it's not even true.
Exactly. Most of the time it probably won't even be true. It's just exactly that. It's a thought. Now, so what I'm talking about here now are mindfulness techniques, and these require practice and, application of effort on the path. And all of this is very important, as I said, as we want to live a harmonious existence at more, to be more peaceful, to be more kind, to be more generous, whatever brings us that good feeling at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So if we're not feeling all those things, we have come to a place of, okay, I'm ready for an alternative. And maybe only 5% of my day is that kind of like, not working. So we're going to focus on that 5%. The 95% that's working is great. Or the 50%, whatever it is that's working, we're going to trust that that's going great.
It's not even a choice. Like usually we always focus on the negative.
Totally.
Like 95% could be good, and we'll only be like replaying the 5% that wasn't.
Right. Totally. Yeah. And that will be there'll be a place that you can observe. Okay. Like people do gratitude journaling, for example, to make sure that the other 95% are included. That's super important. This is a way that you can generate that acceptance of the situation, to see, oh, actually there's a lot of really good going on, so I can hang out in that mode of being and not stress about pushing myself to be some unrealistic version or idealized version of myself.
So it's a lot about just becoming aware of what that reality is, like seeing clearly how things are instead of focusing on something. And by focusing on something, we kind of make it like a lot bigger and
amplified.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's about kind of seeing things more clearly just as they are instead of our version of them.
Totally. Which is going to include things that are working and things that aren't working so well. And my teacher said something really important to me, and I referred to it earlier by saying the Christopher show or whatever, and it was that your personality, he said your personality is going to play its part. It's not who you are, but it's going to play out the role that it was, kind of here to play, however it looks. And it's not written in stone, and it's not completely up for negotiation. It's got momentum to it. It's a personality. It has patterning. It has ideas. And, it's a personality. It's the whole show, the whole history showing up right now. So if I can give that a place in this world, know that it's just one aspect of my being, because awareness is here also. And then there's a personality that's not always aware.
Right.
So the Yael show, for example, we'll call it the Yael show. Yeah, it's the curious ones.
Exactly, this podcast.
A bit of the Yael show is happening, which is exactly as it is. It's not something that I need to add value on. It's just, that's what it is. So the personality that you have now within your awareness, has a role. It has a personality trait. It has certain responsibilities that it has taken on as its own to feel valuable in society, and that's a process that the personality will go through in order to fulfill the human experience. So I'm saying this as an intellectual or philosophical view. Obviously,
Billy is here with us.
Yeah, the Billy show.
Dog, the Billy show.
And the Micah show. Yeah. So these are really good examples. They have their roles and they play their roles, and they're not judging themselves. They just have the personality of cute and snuggly. And also, I could say as animals, we have an element, I don't want to project onto them, but we have an element of awareness that we can step back and say, okay, that's what happened. The Christopher show played out like that. It's much easier in hindsight. We can say, yes, that happened. And now if we can start doing it more in presence of awareness, like real time, we can notice, okay, the Christopher show there's anger coming up, or there's disappointment coming up. Now, I'm talking about a certain view that has come from deep effort of meditation. A view of reality, a view of my life.
Of the personality, or the role of personality.
Exactly. And when I say personality, I'm being quite broad. It's everything that the Christopher show is going on, talking about something philosophical or profound in order, hopefully, to gain some interest of a viewer or have a deeper connection. You see, all this is included.
Yeah.
And yet it has never told me anything about what I actually and ultimately am. You could say it has qualities of that ultimate self, of that pure awareness that are showing up through the character, the personality. Qualities of lightness, or of love, or of spaciousness, or peace, or patience, inspiration, all these qualities that you might equate to a spiritually informed, being, or something like that. Yeah, there are little glimpses of that might shimmer through, of happiness or kindness. And the way I look at it in my interactions, I'm trying to identify with the one who isn't trying to fix the personality. And this is kind of the crux of what I was referring to when I said, you're okay. You're actually quite perfect as you are. What I'm saying is, are we able to identify that I'm not the character, I'm not the one who's trying to fix itself, I'm not the one that's trying to be better. I ultimately am the awareness of all of that, which is quite a beautiful viewpoint to have, because then it's able to participate without adding a lot of negative or positive judgment on it. Participate in what? In the human experience, in even being a better version of myself. But because I know that the character of the Christopher show, I'm not trying to sound, what do you call it when you have split personality or something? It's not actually anything like that. It's more like just an honoring that there's a characteristic that's showing up. Right. We all have our roles that we've identified. That's just a fact. Exactly. Yeah. So we just watch it with a little bit less attachment to how it plays out. Self-acceptance, you could say. But not from the perspective of, oh, I accept my character because I am just like this. It's more like I'm accepting the flower because I don't know how it works, but it just does it. So I'm looking at it. I'm watching and observing my character play out through the day. Yeah. Even get frustrated with something, or even get disappointed with something. Oh. And just by saying, oh, wow, that's how the Christopher, character has formed its best version to be able to deal with that situation, is with frustration. And simply by having that acceptance and awareness, I will naturally adjust and become kinder. It's hard to explain, but I get out of my own way by saying, you know what? I'm sorry that life was challenging at times, that I had, that I had trauma, that I had disappointments, things that would leave me with a sense of frustration. And that beginning awareness of the whole character gains compassion. For yourself. Exactly. Just a field of compassion. Exactly. It gains a sense of a field of compassion, which includes the best that I can do today. And it also includes the best that you can do today. And, like that, so-and-so. So acceptance or compassion, things like that, ideally are a natural side effect of self-awareness. And self-awareness would lead me also to say, I want to do something that serves this situation, be it that serves my own ability in it, or serves the other people's needs in it, whatever it is. Harmony. Serves harmony, something like that, exactly. So when we can accept ourselves in that way of seeing, you know what, it's just a Christopher show. It's just doing its best. I'm playing a personality. I'm playing the role. I'm doing my thing. It's like, it's just like a character in a movie. Yeah, it's a character in a movie, but it's us. It's how we show up, and it's like 100% of our experience in the world. Maybe not 100%. It is a percentage, exactly. It's a percentage of it. And in the Yogic Sutras, you'll see there's a teaching on did we talk about the koshas yet? We did. The layers of the human experience. Yeah, if you haven't listened to that podcast, go check it out. So this is a perfect foundation. That's a perfect foundation for this concept of where's the character of the personality. Yeah, maybe you can explain for somebody who didn't listen. So very simply put, we have 5 layers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The 5 layers are the physical body, the one that we know as the form. Then we have the energy or experience of sensations. Those are coming through touch, they're coming through sight, smell, they're coming through all of our experience of sensations, including subtle sensations, which bridge emotions to the deep subconscious. They become the bridge. So like if I feel tight in the belly, a tightness or contraction, or heavy in the heart, those are also in the second and the third layer. So first layer is physical, second layer is that sensation. The third layer is the subconscious. It's like our mind. It's like all the beliefs and things, experiences, memories, reactions. That's where those come from. The fourth body is our wisdom, our awareness, the one who's able to observe and say, oh, okay, now that's happening. It's like that. And this is something that can happen in moments for people who haven't been meditating. It can happen in moments of trauma, where all of a sudden almost like disidentify with the character or the being, the experience of the body, and like have this out of body experience.
Being
I've heard
an
of people
observer.
becoming purely identified with the observer. People call it like out of body experience. Car accidents, severe abuse, things like that. I'm not suggesting that that's a healthy thing. It's just one instance where people can identify solely with the observer.
Yeah.
It's not integrated. It's not sustainable or healthy to be that disassociated. But it can offer a direct experience.
And it's an aspect of our being.
Exactly. Then once we've gained confidence in this sort of internal journey, then we can access the bliss body directly. Now, like I said about degrees of, we can have infinite degrees of the bliss body. And that's just by having a beautiful conversation, we access and feed and nourish, or do something joyful like playing a sport or being creative, dancing. We feel this sense, like a flavor that our body is saturated with, this, oh, wow, this is joyful. There's a pleasure. There's a life affirmation happening. Like, yes, keep doing that. And that's the bliss body informing our actions. It's like a reward.
Yeah.
So these are all built in the Yogic Sutras, and yet we can see them as distinct as well, and they have different qualities and properties. So when we can identify with the observer as well, so now we're going to go back to this conversation about how do we accept ourselves and let ourselves participate, giving ourselves permission to have the body and the sensations and desire and aversion and all the stuff that the human body experiences, pain, and then we can get into the awareness that, oh, there's a sensation. I don't have to react. I don't have to do anything about it if I don't want to. So in certain practices, we are generating what's called equanimity. And equanimity is that sort of, oh, it's like that.
Yeah.
I don't have to react so hard yet. I can just watch and see what's going to be the best version of my reaction.
Yeah, keeping the balance no matter what happens, the bad and the good.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's really amazing. Great. I don't have to cling to it. I just enjoy it for what it is. That's really terrible or challenging. Okay, this too will pass. Like this part of the deal. It's a pendulum swinging. It's a wave rising and receding. So
just to clarify, we're talking about kind of two different aspects of ourselves. So one of them is the personality, and that's kind of our experience, the way that we show up, our preferences, our dislikes,
based on our experience in the body and the mind and all the sensations that create emotion and generate a character. Yeah.
Would you say that like our thoughts and our words come from that aspect of ourselves?
Well, usually, and you can probably feel it when you're in a conversation with someone, whether or not their words are coming from the deeper, kind places of compassion and awareness, or different degrees of identification with judgment on the body sensation or the emotional pains or difficulties, so it could even be that there's no basis for the conversation. It's just pure fantasy. Not actually embedded in bliss, not embedded in awareness, not embedded in emotion, not even about the physical body, but just most of the time it's a bit of a fantasy, projection. And so
kind of what you think that it should be.
Exactly. Ideas, concepts, future versions, shoulds and shouldn'ts, things like that.
And that I can also tell that about myself, like when I'm speaking from my real truth and when I'm speaking from kind of like my mind, and I'm saying words and I feel like I don't resonate with the words that I'm saying, and I'm like, oh, but it's out already.
Perfect. Exactly.
So
good description.
I definitely feel that. So you're saying, because I really want to clarify this, because we're talking about a lot of different concepts, but they're all very connected to each other. So actually you gave here a distinction that the words and the thoughts that we have could come from two different sources. So
at least two.
At least two. So the first, what we're talking about now, is the personality, and that's, would you say, kind of like more in the head and the concepts that we hold?
Exactly. It'll be based on how I consider myself to be good or bad. It'll be based on whether I accept or don't accept experiences that I'm having, whether that's pain or not, pain or pleasure. The versions of communication that will be based in a wisdom or a more awareness are going to be things that don't push or pull so much against the reality. They won't be holding judgment against this or that.
So that's the other aspect that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's the higher self.
You could say that. Yeah.
The observer, the wisdom body that is always present, but we're not always tapped into it.
Right. Exactly. It's like a program that you could run on your device.
Is it a program or is it just...
Not a program like we're programmed, but like an application. Like an app on your phone, for example.
When you say that, it for me kind of associates with something that is external to me that I kind of like download. Like you download an app on the phone. Yeah. How I look at our higher self as being like the phone, like the original part of ourselves.
I would expand on that and say, well, you can consider us the phone, but I would say the phone is maybe the hardware, the body.
The body, yeah.
And the phone would be the physical thing. And then we have the access to the information field, which would be the Wi-Fi or the signals. That
the
allows
soul of the phone.
The soul, exactly. The part of us that's open to...
I wouldn't be surprised if phones have souls.
Probably soon. Their AI programs are getting pretty smart. So, however the analogy will work for you.
Hey, I'm quickly interrupting the episode to extend an invitation. If you are interested in deepening into any of the subjects we talk about on the podcast, we offer many different experiences on our beautiful grounds here in Baja, Mexico. From 9-day modules such as sound healing and yoga nidra to breath and meditation, as well as 200 or 300-hour yoga teacher trainings and many different shorter retreats. Check out our website yandara.com to see all the information about the different experiences. Let's get back to the episode.
The most important to me is that there's a relaxation response in the body, that I'm watching what's going on in my physical body, because this is the most gross manifestation of my consciousness, which means it's showing up pretty easily to me, or to most of us. We'll see that there's a tension in the shoulders, there's a tension in the throat, a tension in the belly, and these are signals, a tension in the jaw or temples of how we're responding. So we could say, well, I have a little tension from my yoga practice or whatever, but that would be a healthy, muscle building. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about chronic, like I have a knot here, I have a this ease in this part of my body. So to me, these are the signals of whether or not we're accepting our humanity.
Yeah.
And if we're not accepting our humanity, we're going to start judging ourselves and then start contracting mentally and then emotionally and then physically. Yeah.
By disease, it can be like pain or it can be disease.
Exactly. Yeah. Full blown. Exactly. Yeah. So these things are, and we could say there are many different factors. It could be genetic, it could be environmental, things like that. But we become more predisposed to certain conditions if we're living in judgment. I hear a kitty.
And that's Kitty.
Yeah. If we're looking to be in harmony with ourselves and in harmony with all of the beings around us and nature, and most importantly, we have to check and see, is my practice too effortful? Is there too much judgment? If there is, then the body will start to tense up and we'll start to recognize that there are patterns that we might call no pain, no gain, or like this is part of the spiritual path, so I have to struggle. At the same time, hi kitty, you are, in my eyes, exactly as you need to be. No questions asked. At the same time, included in that is a part of you that is aware of your own tendencies, which aren't as helpful for you to enjoy that reality. So your reality is exactly as it needs to be. in this particular moment. It will change. It is constantly changing. And how do we enjoy that more? So the work isn't to change it's not to get in the way of the blossoming of the flower. It's not to try and argue with how big or how small the fruit is. It's how much am I getting in the way of nature playing its role through me of evolution. And if I can recognize that tensions in the body will manifest if I'm getting too tight around my spiritual practice or around my conscious betterment practices or whatever. So that's when we come against this question of am I doing too much or am I not doing enough?
So would you say that the part of ourselves that we're speaking about as the higher self is the one that is perfect and the personality is the one that we can work on?
Actually, the personality is perfect as well. When I say perfect, I don't mean ideal, but it has played out as all nature does in accordance to the law of cause and effect, which means whatever is manifesting right now is a result of the previous moments and can't be any different. It's perfect in that sense. But I know that people define perfect in other ways. They usually mix it up with ideal, which is applying an idea that I have onto the reality or at least projecting it. And then it causes some friction between reality, which is that it's perfect, and my ideals, which is my projection onto it. And that causes tension. So friction in this particular situation will cause the body to tense up because I'm not in harmony with reality, which is that this is how it is, has to be like this. Yael is perfect exactly as she is right now.
So let me give you an example of something that came up in the last few days with a friend of mine that I was speaking with. We were kind of discussing the fact that actually our weaknesses could also be viewed as strengths. So let's say like being a sensitive person in society, it's considered to be a weakness, but it can also completely be a strength because you're more in tune with other people, you're more in tune with yourself. Like being sensitive could be an amazing thing.
Yeah.
So actually she was kind of making a list of all her things that she considers weaknesses, and we wanted to turn them into strength. And then she did that. She did an amazing job. And then she was like, yeah, but some of them I really was stumped. I didn't know how to look at them as a good thing. So when she was sharing, like, I'll give an example. One of them was judgment. I mean, judgment, you can't, like being judgmental. There really isn't a way that you can make that into a positive thing. I mean, it's good to have discernment. It's good to, be aware of how things are. But in the end, this judgment causes this tension in the body.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of explain that?
Yeah. So the process that you're describing is working with the mind to antidote a mental patterning. So trying to make what we have normally judged as negative into a positive thing so we can start to accept ourselves more. And right, like, so it's a technique of antidote. Negative thought for positive thought, or perspective, negative perspective for positive perspective. So both of them are judgments. And it's important to just have that bit of awareness that, at the end of the day, if we can recognize that us trying to add good and bad onto any aspect will ultimately lead us to these conundrums of like, how do I make it good, or how do I make it better? It's going to end up being a little bit of a struggle.
It's kind of creating a fact that it can be good or bad.
Exactly.
Instead of just what it is.
Exactly. And that is a devastating reality to arrive at for the ego, to arrive at the simple understanding that it's like this. This is how it is. And that is just what it is. And that's okay for now.
Yeah.
If we can sit with that for just a moment, what would happen in the body? What would happen in the mind field if all of a sudden we got off the good, bad kind of framework and started to just float in the, all of it as it is right now, just for this particular moment, can it be okay? Knowing it's not defining us, it's not adding or taking value. It's just as it is. How would you feel how would you feel having that perspective land in the body?
It feels light. It feels like kind of the opposite of contraction, like
releasing,
releasing.
allowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. So that would be a touchstone. That's a landmark. That's a beacon in your body now. As you proceed, if you notice an alternate path starting to create itself, like a contraction or trying, then it will be able to be recognized much more quickly when you can just identify, okay, that's presence, that's acceptance of reality, so I can move with awareness, this feeling, and it's a constant feeling. It will completely lead you, you might say, in the direction of peace.
Something that's really hitting me right now that is that acceptance of something. So just letting something be as it is doesn't necessarily mean you don't want to change it.
Yeah, for sure.
So you can accept something and at the same time want to change it.
You know, you'll have to check and see internally how much of that wanting to change it may still be affecting the infinite scale of acceptance, or the infinite scale of surrender that you're just touching into just now.
Yeah.
Because this is not an on and off switch. It's an infinite scale.
Yeah.
Because if we practice this acceptance, this sort of, oh, wow, this from here to here, we realize that it's an infinite opportunity. It keeps expanding potentially into a radically alternate reality of truth, power, bliss, peace, radiance.
I think you might not be the person to speak about this example with, but okay. I've heard it said in a way that like you can love the apartment that you live in and where you live in right now and yet still want to get a different house.
Yeah, exactly.
So like you can still be in this acceptance of where you are now and totally love it, and still want to change in a way.
Yeah, for sure. And that will be our exploration. That'll be our life, is to check and see what percentage of that other version of reality, what percentage of our awareness is in that other version that we're projecting into the future. I'm assuming it'll be a future event that we're preferring, right? An event
like moving into a different house.
Yeah. If we don't live in there yet,
right,
we're producing and generating an image, an idea of an imagined feeling of how it will be in that future event, right? We're creating an idea of that future event. We're identifying it as pleasurable or more pleasurable than the one we're in. Right? Is this making sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is just then a checking. How much of my attention is in that version of the future? And it could be 1% or it could be 90%, whatever it is. And the degree of that is up to each of us to negotiate how much or how little we want to invest in that future. Unfortunately, it usually works proportionately to our sense of peace. Now, what I mean by that is, if I say, I'm okay with this reality, but 90% of my day, I'm building this other reality. And I'm getting all the details on how I'm going to feel and how it's going to be and everything like that. And then here comes the 1% or the 10%. Sorry, here comes the 10% where you have to just be in this reality. How easy is it for you to just to be like, wow, look at all this beauty here. Look at all this that I have. Am I starting to make sense?
Yeah.
You see how the time relative in the future relative to the presence will start to affect the power that you have to actually live in the reality.
But it's tricky because, as we discussed already, there is a natural evolution that we are naturally inclined to go through. So, I mean, wanting to evolve in any way is kind of like a natural part of ourselves, but there's what you're talking about now is kind of living in this future experience so much that you are missing the current experience.
Exactly. And there's only one guarantee. Death.
Yes.
So let's say at the time of death, we're still living in that because it's an addiction. It's like any entertainment, an imagined fantasy future. And we can live in that a long time.
Yeah.
And then at the moment of death, which is either when we have to go to bed at night, that's a type of death, the death of the day. Maybe we let go of this exhale. That's another death. And if the ride until that moment was disassociative, then that particular experience will have much, much more challenge involved in it in terms of accepting it.
If we're disassociated from the moment that is...
From the moments leading up to that moment.
Which moment?
Either the exhale or the falling asleep, the end. Whatever the end will be, whether it's a day or a breath or a life or a job or a partnership or whatever it is that will come to an end.
So disassociated from what's happening now.
Yeah. It will affect that particular process a lot. So it behooves us to be more present in the actual experience so that when we're not happy about the situation, we don't linger. We just move. I'll give you a really, really easy example. If you put some food in your mouth that's bitter and not what you're interested in, how long would you keep it in your mouth if you're not interested in eating it?
Not very long.
Yeah. And did you have to say, oh, there's apple pie down the road that I really want to have? Like, did you have to do that before you spit? No. This is a presence that has guided your movement to relieve yourself of that particular situation without having a projected fantasy of what it should be. You just know, I'm done with that now. That's not really, I'm not interested in that.
Yeah, but this is a little bit different because let's say we're talking about the apartment again, like it's not that I might not be able to really change anything at the moment. Maybe I can't afford the other house that I want to do in. Maybe I'm like in a contract, there's a lot of reasons, but you might not be able to do it at the moment. And it's kind of really, you're in a place that you're working towards something.
Sure, exactly. And so that working towards process is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's say you're working towards it for a month. If in that month you're living in the version, like really just like that, and then you die after the month. And
I'll add before that like the current situation might not be as bad as having something bitter in your mouth. Like can be still good, so it's not something that's obvious that you need to leave that situation.
Right. So then you wouldn't, then you don't leave.
But you still want to advance to like something more spacious, maybe having like a meditation room, having a guest room. Like you want to have more space for, entertaining, having,
So just noticing. I think that's really what it's about. Is so like, say you work really hard to get that thing that you've imagined will make you feel what you want to feel. What do you want to feel? How do you feel in that future version?
Comfortable and free and just relaxed, peaceful.
Okay, wow. I'm assuming that's why you want to create that situation, so you can enjoy all those feelings.
I mean, I could have them now.
Uh-oh. Shoot. I hate to say it. You might have just blown this conversation out of the water. Yeah. So, yeah.
So what you're saying is basically like all these emotions that we project about a future experience are accessible right now.
Absolutely. Now, you could argue and say, oh, what if I'm in an abusive relationship or whatever? That's what I mean, bitter. If you literally cannot relax, if you cannot feel ease because you're defending yourself or there's something that distasteful going on, then spit it out. Get the hell, you know what I mean? So yeah, you get it out of this field. Get it. I can't be in this situation if I'm on drugs, alcohol, things that are really toxifying my body, or relationships or work that are really not able to be integrated into that feeling that you just described. That's when we spit. And we have to do that sometimes. We have to get out of the situation.
And we can also say that like feelings of judgment, of anger, of hate are the same feeling as, being in an abusive relationship or...
Yep. Spit them out. Stop feeding thoughts. Like, every time we invest our energy in them, it's like taking another on that kind of bitter reality of judgment and projection, things like that.
Definitely.
So,
Spit it out.
Spit it out. Just like cleanse your palate with some breath work, some alone time in nature, some good exercise.
Let's go into that because it's easier said than done.
Definitely. We're talking philosophically right now, and we're in a very comfortable environment. And there's a lot of,
So what are some techniques that one could use to let go of anger, let go of judgment, let go of hate, all these emotions that make us feel bad?
Let go is an interesting term. I'm going to just redefine it right now so that we can know we're using the same language. Actually, can we just use let be?
Yeah.
Okay. So how can we let be the reality that this is the best I can do? The personality has all these historical events that have caused this reaction to be its best effort. And maybe the next moment will be better, but this one we got, that was the best version it had. So anger was a natural response. Can we
yet it didn't make us feel good.
Exactly. And so letting be gives us that, what you just described, awareness. Oh, that didn't actually work out for me. Now I have to apologize. Now I have to go back and, all this energy to fix the issues that I created just by being reactionary, whatever like that. So by letting be for a moment, that happened, we gain what you just described as what I would say is wisdom. I don't need to do that anymore. At least right now, it doesn't make sense to do that. So I can see it for what it is. I don't even have to intellectualize it. It's just in the body. Doesn't feel great. There are alternatives. One of them is going to be, first to start, like I said, is let be. This is the foundation. If I can't start with that, I'm not going to make progress.
So acceptance of what is.
Yeah. What is the personality has limitations in terms of its awareness of how to proceed. My personality is basing its response on historical pain, disappointment, whatever it is, judgments. So I have a whole history that leads me to this moment to get angry or frustrated.
Yeah, but what comes up for me when you say that, like, I feel that I've experienced this in the past, and I know that this is a very common practice for people, that from this experience, let's say they reacted in a very harsh way in a certain situation, what comes up from that moment is really hard to accept, because actually what happens is the opposite, like self-hatred arises, and we start...
That's the real issue.
We start kind of like bashing ourselves and putting ourselves down and defining ourselves as like a flawed human because of that reaction. So to say, okay, accept that it happened is really hard. Yeah.
Well, we start small, start with more bite-sized events, little snippets, for example, before we manifest an action that we might feel bad about, like yelling at somebody or, physically, hitting someone or whatever, there's a whole process that has occurred before that. And if we can start with, for example, in a sitting meditation, let's say a fly, or even right here, we're doing a type of discussion that's fairly meditative. We're trying to be conscious at least of what we're saying. And then the cat starts meowing or something that you might think, oh, what can I do about that? I don't want that to be happening. And these are smaller events, but right before the manifestation of frustration and anger outwardly, there's the whole internal dialogue of, is it going to be yogic of me to like hiss the, shoo the cat away? Or is it going to be There's a whole process that could go on. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of more bite-sized events. Whether or not we can accept, okay, there's a part of me that's frustrated right now because I have an idea of how I think reality should be. And it rubs up against the fact that it's like this. I wish the cat wasn't, meowing or whatever. Well, it is meowing. And so how do I attune myself to reality so that I can get on board and work with it? And this is how I practice acceptance and letting be, starting with smaller events that I wished wasn't like that. And the cat shouldn't be meowing. He should be. For example, if I can notice what happens in my body, be in my body's experience, then I can get really quick, real-time feedback. Oh, there's a tension in my belly. Oh, my jaw just got tight. Or, oh, my posture just changed to a defensive or a kind of a, something I have to maintain. Or, the body, it does it. It responds. So if we can scan the body, start scanning the body head to toe for contractions and notice them. And really get, intimately curious about where in the body are holding patterns that are generally just accepted as daily life. Oh, the belly. Oh, it's just been holding for no reason. Oh, the shoulders or the teeth. This is a massively helpful process because the body is our temple. This is where we actually show up to pray, basically, you might say, to this infinite power of natural manifestation. That's this magic that's happening. Our body will tell us whether we're in tune with it or not. So yes, it's difficult, but we've got to get out of that world of thought for long enough. Is that a mosquito? Okay, so how do you know what I mean? Like, what happens?
Yeah, when it was biting me and I was listening so quietly.
Rather than a big violent slap. Yeah. So it's doing its best to feed its family and, go out and gather. So the body's response. You asked me, how do we do this? There's no easy pill that you can take. It's literally reprogramming our response to the daily life by little increments of mindfulness.
So basically what you're saying, which I think is a great approach, to start by doing that with situations that aren't very, very triggering to us, and by kind of strengthening that muscle of accepting things that didn't go exactly as we wanted, we can do that.
Softening the muscle of acceptance.
Yeah, that's true. Softening into these moments, definitely.
Yeah, I get it.
No, I agree. That's a good correction. So softening when these things happen, then we'll be more used to softening when things happen that are of bigger magnitude.
Perfect. That was a brilliant digested version of that concept. The experience that I have personally is one of checking and checking and checking. So it's not like, oh, I've fixed something and now I'm good. It's more like I've learned that there are alternative responses to the day, alternative responses to this challenge, alternative responses to this. And the response that I would have last week or last year or 10 years ago is still there. But I have just learned that there are a multitude of options available. And with a little bit of practice, I have more time and space to choose.
The ones that feel good.
That feel better, exactly, yeah. So it's just a little bit of stepping back from the knee-jerk kind of habitual responses. And, like we're all doing that every day. We're trying to be better versions, but if we don't know that there's an alternative, then it might seem insurmountable, if we don't know what to do. And it could be just one breath, and we can all just take one breath right now to see, like, how long does it take to take a breath? Okay, that was a couple of seconds there. That's enough time to make an alternative choice. So it could be as simple as just one breath I commit to taking one breath before responding to any challenging thing that arises. And in that one exhale, so the inhale gives me back my power. The exhale allows space for acceptance. The inhale, I regain personal power. The exhale, the power to accept. Now, acceptance doesn't mean apathy. It just means efficiency. So I can actually respond to what needs to be responded to, not to all this other stuff that I might want to respond to. My ego loves to push and pull against things, but it's not going to help anything. It's just going to be a habit, and it's comfortable to have that. Does that make sense? It's kind of like it's an add-on. I can respond to so many things that I don't actually need to respond to. So it's not efficient. It's not really the way nature works. Nature is very efficient, actually. It really only does what it needs to for harmony to be re-experienced. And it's not like I'm seeking harmony. Like, where's the harmony? It takes effortless effort. And one of my teachers would often say it takes tremendous effort to realize that effort will get you nowhere. It takes tremendous effort to realize that effort will get us nowhere. And it's a bit of a simplified, statement. But if you can kind of hear that there is a bit of a paradox here.
Of course.
Effortless effort. What is that? Well, to me, it's defined with two principles. Showing up so that I can let be. I show up so that I have the capacity to decide how I'm responding. Am I resisting and pushing and fighting, or am I allowing it to be so that I can adjust?
Could you give an example of something very practical?
Yeah. So if like I'm managing a project, like a physical work project, and the ideal that I have in my mind and that was talked about and discussed was to finish it, for example, on this set time or date. And that set time and date is nearing or has arisen. And remember we talked about how much time we spend in that future version? So if I'd spend a lot of time in that future version, and because of that, I'd then start to base other future versions on that particular ideal future version. So I spent a lot of time, and that situation arose where, this primary reality or primary fantasy is not a reality. I can get frustrated and I can say, okay, this is ridiculous. Who do you think you are, making these promises and and all this stuff. I have this plan and this plan and this plan. So chances are that person who I might be depending on to manifest that fantasy, that it's done, chances are they're doing their best. And I can discuss with them what my challenges are, and maybe they will adjust.
And the effort is?
So the effort is me pushing and pushing and pushing to say, let's do this, let's do that, let's do this, let's do that. In that situation, it might even be actually like choosing to work, in a different way or something like that, where all I really ultimately would need to do is recognize, first of all of my visions that I projected from that idea are my visions. They're my fantasies. They're not his. So I can't put them on him. All I can say is, I had this idea that I was going to try and do this and this and this.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to be possible? If he says yes, but but it didn't happen, then okay, he did his best.
So that's the effortless effort.
The effortless, yeah.
Yeah, the part of you that really wants it to be different, but it isn't. So instead of you're exerting effort to not react in a way that kind of blows up the situation or, shouting at this person or something like that.
Right. So it's effort towards being effortless.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm putting awareness, I'm putting attention, mindfulness on. That's not actually very efficient to speak, in a way that blames someone, for example,
Mm-hmm.
it makes them feel bad, or makes them feel reactionary, or causes them to quit, or or to resent the job altogether, then the quality goes down, or whatever. Lots of different things can come out of me using excess effort to manipulate and to try and create something that's not actually happening, to try and fulfill my vision of it, or my fantasy of it. Now, there's always a gray scale. I'm not suggesting it should be one or the other. It's just going to be somewhere in between usually.
Yeah.
So my job, my effort, is to watch how much energy I'm using by tensing up and fighting to defend my shoulds, and shoulding all over other people in the meantime. All that takes a lot of energy. Or responding. Okay, this is what's happening. So how can we address the situation? Okay, let's see. Do you know anybody else who can come in and support this project so we can get more of it done?
Yeah. So when we speak about effortless effort, we're talking about the fact that it takes some amount of effort in order to be effortless, in order to not react, in order to let yourself soften into what's happening instead of fighting with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when we're talking about coming back to the reason we spoke about this, we're talking about the effortless effort as a technique to be in acceptance and a softening. I love this word because it's so true to this situation. So being in this sort of softening into whatever's happening in order for it to be able to have this natural evolution that is part of it.
Yes. And these experiences will become easier and easier to accept. These experiences of, oh, I had an idea and it's not working out that way. So it's like, you said a muscle, we're toning a muscle to work properly, to present an idea, work towards it, and then accept what reality manifests. So, and not accept with apathy, because each moment is a new moment and each opportunity is a new opportunity. So I'm accepting as a flow and simultaneously efforting into whatever might be next. But the effort can become out of proportion to the acceptance. And that's when we gain these sort of chronic levels of stress in our bodies, in our minds.
When it's disproportionate.
Disproportionate, exactly. When we're too much in that fantasy of the future and not enough in the feeling reality of this is what it is. It's like this.
Okay, so it's about this balance of being in the present and being in the future.
Well, we don't actually get to the future. We can't be in it doesn't arise, but we can project a fantasy.
Yeah, and also goals in a way are important in order to be an efficient human being who wants to grow and create and do things in the world. I mean, I see goals as something that could be very beneficial and very positive.
Yes.
But when they are done in a proportionate manner, let's say.
Exactly. And I would say, what is an appropriate proportion? Maybe 10-90. Maybe say 10% vision. 90% presence, application, response. Because
that's so true, because actually the only thing we really have control over is the moment right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if we're not here for it, then we will lose a lot of our power.
And we'll never get to where we want to go.
Exactly. Well said. Yeah.
Yeah. I see it really as like, if you're really so much in the future that you're forgetting the moment now, then you're losing power, and the power that you need to get to where you want to go in a healthy amount of way.
Yeah. And luckily and hopefully we don't actually have to get to that future event for us to realize ultimately what that event promises.
And that is?
Perfect peace. Yeah. Perfect fulfillment, harmony. And in every aspect of our being, we have that as it's our nature. So we can project it onto that future version of our reality, which is, I think, helpful to get us off of our butt, get us onto the mat, get us into nature, get us off the screen, get us whatever it is. Mm-hmm. If we, the dangling carrot, it's what, yes, it gets us moving. But that movement is what it's about. It's about the movement. It's not about the destination. It's about the actual movement that carrot inspires.
Yeah.
So if we can enjoy then the process, enjoy the experience of applying physical effort in a practice, or a mental effort in a vision, or, like the designing of something, or, however you want to look at it, it's the process that actually evolves us in consciousness, not the destination.
Definitely. We all know this feeling of getting to where we wanted to be and being like, oh, wait, but I thought it would feel better. I thought It would last for longer.
Right. Totally. I mean, classic quote. Well, I'll put it this way. Have you ever worked so hard for that thing, that physical object, and then when it arrived, it was great for about 10 minutes, at that.
Yeah.
And what was that greatness? That greatness had nothing ultimately to do with the object, but rather with us stopping the search into the future. Mm-hmm. And we just arrived in presence for those 10 minutes and enjoyed the hell out of our existence and our being in its full glory.
Yeah.
We projected it onto that piece of whatever it is, and then we forgot about it and went back to the search.
Yeah.
And life continues as a consumer into infinitum,
Mm-hmm. And when we speak about kind of qualities in ourselves, because I don't know if it's exactly transferable, because let's talk about judgment, just because we already did. Arriving at a point where we no longer have judgment could be more long-lasting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful observation. Yeah.
So there's a distinction between different types of goals. Goals that are, I guess, is it from like the personality, the ego, and the higher self, or this harmony that we're always striving for?
Yeah, if you think about like what is the goal of a tree? If you think it has a certain movement, it has a process, it has an experience, it has a journey.
To be a tree.
Exactly. to know itself fully as a tree and to fulfill its natural place, right? To do its thing. So how would it feel for you to have that level or that quality of knowing that I'm a human, I'm here to be human for a while?
The real human.
Yes.
Yeah.
Being human, being in the human experience, not what we think humans should do, but the growing, deepening, curious being of humanness. Is that something that is okay for a while? To let that be enough.
The process of becoming deeply us.
Us, well said. And if goals arise within that take us into future moments of fantasy and projection, fine, let them be that. But that's included in the humanness. That's embraced within the process of being human. And that's okay.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So I think that we kind of spoke about the important aspects of this idea. Is there anything that you think we should add, or you would like to add?
Well, 10% philosophy, 90% practice. This level of trust in nature and our own nature, our own human experience doesn't happen with a philosophical view. It can start with an inspiration, but really ultimately these become more embedded in our daily life when we make space for them and put that higher on our priority list if we're interested. if we're interested in having an alternative approach.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you feel that what we spoke about in terms of the practical aspects of it is sufficient, or is there something that you think we should add there?
Everyone will have their practice of choice, which things help them become deeper human, deeper here, deeper, yeah. And that could be anything. In the West, I would say anything that brings us generally from our head into being in the body. And that could be strenuous activities, it could be life-threatening things like rock climbing, it can be dancing, it could be archery. It doesn't really matter ultimately, but in the meantime, we will want to be mindful of the side effects. Certain things will have less harmful side effects, or certain things will be less addictive. Certain things will become more wholesome. So the activity ultimately isn't important, but realistically, they do have effects on us. I'll give you an example. If being in my body is easier to achieve rock climbing, you could say, because I can't be anywhere else, that's great. You could say it's my meditation. But also, is there any damage to the body that I'll have to deal with? Is there any, what percentage of injury might occur? How much am I becoming dependent on the introduction of adrenaline into my bloodstream in order to anchor into presence? What are the different side effects that come along with that particular practice or that meditation or technique for presencing? And just, do your research. And check and see if it's sustainable. And the way I look at my practice is that if it's something I can bring off my mat, more of that, the better. If I'm dependent on having a rock face, then I will not be able to have that peace.
When you're not doing it.
Yeah. So, because why? It's not triggering my adrenaline from fight or flight. So I'm slowly and gradually working towards less and less dependence on intensity, on extreme environments, on extreme highs and low situations to bring me into presence. And ultimately, little by little, we don't need a condition. We can just choose.
Yeah.
Because we're familiar. Exactly. Because we would be familiar with what it is to be present and honoring this experience.
So what are some activities that you do to feel that presence, that you feel are more wholesome for yourself?
Breath, deepening breath. It's a very powerful one. Being in the ocean, being in water. I could go on and on about nature. It's an immediate reflection of how to accept one's place in this natural universe. It's amazing. Nature, being in nature. Asana practice, moving my body in ways and challenging my balance.
What is considered yoga practice in the West?
So
yoga the practice. Physical practice of yoga.
Exactly. I want to be very clear that I don't think that yoga necessarily will do what I'm talking about. It depends on how you practice it. I know many people are still just looking at it as a way to perform. Well, either to do, it's fine, work out, but a way to perform a more physically or externally attractive or correct posture. So just be mindful of that. It can be a slippery slope. To be
what would be the...
Well, to always think that I'm not quite there yet within the posture.
So the opposite would be to know that...
To experience the process of the posture as that's the aim. The aim is to be in the sensations of the practice, not to work incessantly towards the posture that's just out of reach. Because that's just another neurotic, sort of habit.
Future
goal. Exactly. So we're projecting a future version of ourselves that then I'll be masterful, and it's not really like that. having gone through a lot of different stages of mastery of asana and certain practices, I can see that it's important to feel inspired. Remember the dangling carrot. Like, yes, put those postures out in front of you and work towards them. Great. But don't take it too seriously. Don't take yourself seriously. Just be in the practice, be in the body, be in the breath, be in the sensations that bring energy, and enjoy that, more and more.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And being with family, friends, all these things I think are very helpful as well. Animals, things that are doing dishes, things that are less about a future version, because our society has kind of set us up into this fantasy of a future, and that's what we're up against. Unbuckling ourselves from that unnecessary waste of time.
And realizing that we already have everything that we need.
We already have everything, and the more that comes, great. The more that goes, great. We're doing what we're doing, and just pay attention.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a amazing way to wrap things up. I mean, in the end, we have everything that we need. It's just about experiencing that truth instead of chasing something that's always out of reach.
Well said. Can we take a few breaths together and experience everything that's here?
Please.
Just to complete our discussion and our topic, and if you want to join us, we can allow the awareness that might be already thinking, what am I going to do after this podcast, or what am I going to have for dinner, or I can't wait to practice what they're talking about. It doesn't happen like that. We just do it right now. So as we're sitting or driving or whatever you're doing, just allow the breath to become more interesting than it was. Okay, so just for a couple moments, if you want to close your eyes, if it's safe, if you're not driving, close your eyes. Otherwise, this breath becomes more interesting than it was. And we open to the gifts that life is constantly offering us. As a feeling, and we participate just like this, and that's enough. We will respond when it's time to go and get food. We get hungry and we get food. When it's time to go to sleep, we feel more gravity, heavy in the body, and we go sleep. When it's time to wake up, we'll feel rested and we get out of bed. Nature is constantly breathing us into life. How does it feel to trust that a little bit more today? Yes to life. Thank you.
Perfect. Christopher, thank you so much. This was just as it needed to be.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Now, after this time to nurture your mind and your spirit, we invite you to take a moment to consider others. A kind wish might come to mind. Know that what we learn becomes more valuable when we apply it and share it with others. So share this episode on Instagram stories, tag Yandara and I, or share with a loved one so that more people can benefit from it. Our hope is that the search will lead you home to who you already are, to what was always there. We'll be back next week with more inspiration, honest conversation, and insight into the energetic world around us. Thank you for listening and watching.